Alright everyone, so now we're going to take an in-depth look at the buff delay down. So essentially there's two main functions for this, a primary one and a secondary one. The secondary function is if I've got bottles that are top heavy or they're jostling a lot as they're coming down the conveyor, what I want is as they come underneath my nozzles and they settle down and the bottle stops shaking so much, there's enough time with that buff delay down that when the nozzles come down, they stop shaking and it'll give clean entrance for my nozzles into the containers. So it just gives time for the containers to stop wobbling as they come down the conveyor and then settle, and then my nozzles can come in. The primary function is essentially in an ideal world, you're always going to have two containers which have just been filled in theory, and then my two containers are about to get filled. But you never know what's going to be happening upstream. You might have an operator only placing one container at a time, and they might walk away without an even number of containers on here, or you might have an in-feed table and it runs out and there's an uneven number of bottles coming down the line. And as you can imagine, if I just remove just one container here, or even let's just say I only have one container at all on here, and I'll just shove these down over here. If I run this, as this bottle comes past this sensor, first thing that's going to happen is these nozzles are going to come down and there's going to be no bottles actually present. So whether there's no containers present or only some, let's just say I turn this on and I actually turn my conveyor on, just push that back up. What we're actually going to see here is, kind of not a good situation. Machine runs, product all over the conveyor, or maybe I've only got one container here, but regardless, it's kind of the worst situation you can have when you're running. It means the production's got to stop. It means we've got to have virtually stop the line, stop production, which is never what we want. So what I want to ensure is my buff delay down switch is long enough. Just change one of those settings here for the video. I want to ensure that my buff delay down is long enough that there's enough time for one bottle to get past here without the machine triggering. So I'll just have it set to off right now. I'll just do a count in my head or out loud. 1,000, 2,000. So about 2 seconds and I know my container can get past. So I'm just going to come to this. I'm going to dial it up. This is in 0.1 second increments. So 20 times 0.1 gives us our 2 seconds. I'll just go a little bit over because I want to be safe versus rather than sorry. And then speed setting will pull everything back down. So now what I'm going to do is put my container upstream. I'll flick this to on, and we'll actually see this count down. 1,000, 2,000. There was enough time there that the machine didn't trigger. And that way, it doesn't matter what my operator is doing upstream. One container, two container, how many containers can come down at whatever rate they want, and the machine's not going to operate unless I have two bottles underneath here, and then the third one comes and triggers this. So if we just take a quick look, we'll jump across and see the timer actually ticking over. We can actually see it dialing down, and once the whisker goes, it actually jumps back up. So just catch that one more time. We can just see counting down, it jumps back up once our bottle's past the whisker. So that's our buff delay down function. Very important, make sure that we don't get product on here. Now, buff delay up. So this is once our nozzles come down into the containers, how long until the nozzles start to raise. The reason I'm going to be using my buff delay up is with our containers, I'm just going to pull one of these out of the way and I'll turn the conveyor off just to make visualizing this a little bit easier. In theory, what I want, nozzles come down and you'll see I can only get my nozzles, I can bring them a little bit closer, but there's always going to be a little bit of a gap between the base of the nozzle and the bottom of the container. So what I want is I want nozzle to come down. I want the nozzle to remain static at the base, the product to fill up to the tip of the nozzle, and then I want my nozzle and the product to be filling at the same speed. So I want my buff delay up time or delay to be long enough that the product will get up to the nozzle tip when it's inside the container, and then the same speed at which the nozzles are raising, I want my liquid to be filling, so it's all coming up together. We're trying to absolutely minimize the gap between the nozzle tip and the product, just to avoid any frothing, agitating, and really any bubbling of the product, because the last thing we want is to get halfway up and the rest of this is already bubbled and then it starts spurting out the top. So buff delay up, we're allowing for the product to reach the nozzle and then the product and the nozzle to raise at the same rate together. The final part of the sequence is our gate delay. So this is actually at the conclusion of the fill. So after it's filled and my nozzles come out, once my nozzles hit the top sensor inside the bottom up fill, what it's actually going to do is feed the gate delay, and that is how long the nozzles or the gates will hold, even though the fill cycle is done. It's at the very end of the cycle, how long it will hold. And what we're doing here is if there are any drips or anything on the tips of the nozzles, it just gives enough time for a drip to fall into the container and not fall on the handle or somewhere else in the container. If you're using our positive shut-off nozzles, generally this isn't going to be a concern for you, but there are instances where you've got a really sticky product, or maybe you've got something really thick or viscous and you might need to employ this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to turn this gate delay time up quite high, just so we can see it in effect here. I'll do the same with our buff delay up, and we can actually watch all of these in sync now. So I'm just going to run a container down, and we'll just see. No, apologies, I'm on off. Just see, buff delay down happens, nozzles come down into here. Our buff delay up is going to be the next timer. We're going. The container is going to come out. Now, the next thing that we're going to see is our gate delay. Fill's done, and then we're waiting, then the gates swap. And all that waiting on the gate delay allows is for just that little drop to fall down into the containers if required. So those are the three timers that we have on here. The other features we've got on this control box is going to be our reset switch. So if I put a container just off center here and then I trigger this machine to run, what's going to happen is the nozzle will hit here. And essentially what we don't want is the machine to continue trying to force the nozzles down if something's in the way. So I'll just trigger this here. Hits here, stops, slowly goes back up. There could be an instance if an operator gets a hand in the way or there's a container or something, whatever, you don't want the machine to damage your product or hurt somebody. So this machine isn't going to operate even if I try and trigger these sensors now. What we need to do, click it off, hit the reset button, and you'll generally be able to hear just some kind of air passing through. Now if I flip this on, the machine will start to operate once that buff delay downtime is triggered out, and you can see that we're back to running normally or as we should be. So you'll need to engage the reset anytime there's a little safety roller sensor valve on the top of this gets triggered, which is if anything ever gets in the way underneath here. Finally, we have our emergency stop. End all, be all, if something's going wrong, hit the red button. A good example of this is just going to be if, for whatever reason, I set this up and I have product going out over here, if someone is in the way and it looks like they're going to get hurt, whatever. If you just need everything to stop, you hit the emergency stop button. So it doesn't matter where we are at the cycle, we can hit this and different things will happen, but more or less. If I engage this now, lose air to this, so there's no more air pressure holding this up, our nozzles will automatically seal themselves closed. One of the few parts that still has air, but what we do is we just trigger it so that no product can be going anywhere, because generally people are hitting the emergency when product is going everywhere. To take my emergency off, I need to flick it to off, and then I'm just going to spin this. Just make sure you're out of the way and careful. And we have something called a soft start on here, which means the machine takes 3 to 5 seconds to get to full pressure. But that's why we flick it to off, because if we just try and leave it on and unengaged emergency, the machine will start to try and run without full air supply to the machine. Now I can run again. We can be anywhere in the cycle and engage the emergency. We can be on our way up and we can still engage it. Same thing's going to happen. I'll lose air pressure to my bottom up fill cylinder. Nozzles will close, main drive also won't have pressure on it, and then our rotary valve or spool valve will actually go so it's facing back into the cylinder. Again, all we're trying to do is just minimize any product and anyone, if their hand is in the way or something like that, getting damaged or hurt. So always flick it off when we're releasing the emergency. Give it a count of 5 seconds once you've released it, and then we can flick it back to on and run. So that's a quick rundown on our control box. The only other thing we'll do is just for our just run, there's another video that shows altering the volume on the machine. Just keep in mind, if you are going to change the volume, have it set to adjust, and you'll see that in the other video. So again, we use this control box on any form of our twin, whether it's the twin 5-litre or the twin 3 series. And there's an alternative video for the control box on our full head filler. Thanks guys.